Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unity Radiant Light. This is Sunday, October 2nd. This is the second talk in the Principles of Prosperity series, a 4-week series. And today I'll be talking about the language of oneness. I'm Reverend Cherie Ruffo. So glad to be here with you today. So this is the second talk, as I said, about the unity principles of prosperity. I decided to take a different approach to prosperity. We have a prosperity series every fall, and I really wanted to go back into the heart of prosperity and look at some of the principles that maybe we haven't talked about as much. And I'm looking forward to exploring these with you. Last week, we talked about prosperity as your inheritance. The fact that it's not something to go out and obtain because you inherited it. And a lot of times we live within illusion and don't realize that this is actually our inheritance. So we're meant to be prosperous. You are born for it. So today's talk is on the language of oneness and how you think about oneness, you say, well, how does that relate to prosperity? And we have to have oneness to have true prosperity. And I'm going to go back in the history a little bit, and we're going to talk about when Christianity was founded, and also even we're going to go all the way back into the Hebrew scriptures and take a quick look at that too, to see what our language is like. And the problem is when different forms of faith, Judaism, Christianity, a lot of the religions that came later are founded more on the language of separation. In many, it was founded, when this happened, it changed our relationship to God, what we believed our relationship to God was. We believed that God was outside of ourselves. We believed that God was an entity. So our prayers, our care for the soul, and so many other things contribute to the sense of alienation of God. And I'm not saying that this is meant to cause that. It's just something that we're going to look at and we're going to tweak in our own lives and just become aware of it so we can step into that prosperity and remember more of who and what we are. So this talk has a lot of unity in it too. I've been looking really at Charles Fillmore and some of Myrtle's work, the co-founders of Unity, for these talks and looking at some of their published and unpublished talks that they had or works that they had too. So the first thing that comes to mind when we're talking about the language of oneness to me is Unity's 5 basic principles. There's only one presence and one power active in the universe and as my life, God the good. See, there's one presence, which means in the second principle is our essence is of God, therefore we're inherently good. This God essence is fully expressed in Jesus, the Christ, but it's also fully expressed in every single one of us. And I love one of the teachings we use with the kids to remember very quickly the 5 principles. So on the hand chart there, it would be God is and I am. Think about that. God is, I am. So therefore, we know in these unity principles, this principle of oneness with God is an underlying principle. And principle we know means what? Law. It's not just a suggestion. This is how it works. So Jesus came into the world as this incarnation of divine love. And because of that, today we're still talking about him. He's still the most been on Time magazine more than any other figure in history. Here's this person that lived over 2,000 years ago when there wasn't any kind of social media or pictures, that lived in a time that these teachings were so profound that he's still the most talked about person today. And he came with this radical message of love, with this message that we are children of light, which was so different from what most of our belief systems at the time were. And that was the purpose and point of his life, is to wake us up and to remind us who and what we already are. So his presence, his very essence, people said even being in his presence, you could feel that love. His teachings and his whole life and death were just an expression of this embodiment of divine love. He followed no law other than his own inner law, the law of love. So when he came here, he delivered his messages of love, peace, harmony, equality, justice, gender equality, care for the poor, the sick, the lonely, the persecuted. And he also cared about our natural world. So he brought this in with us, which when I sat and was really thinking about this is very different from the teachings that most of us have grown up with. Now, I'm not here to criticize any religion. I'm not here to criticize anything. I'm just here to bring some of these thoughts forward. So this message of awareness grows. So his message then and now is the perfect correction for this belief in separation. You know, he really, when we say he was the embodiment of divine love, we're talking about the 12 powers that we talk about in unity. The fourth power, the power of love, that all-encompassing power. So where did this belief in separation come from? We look back in history and we'll see the language of separation really started with the language of the story of Adam and Eve. The first time that we were portrayed as bad and flawed, that we did something bad. God created us perfect, and we did something bad, and we were thrown out of the Garden of Eden because of that. And then we go on today talking about the original sin, the sin that we still carry with us, these flaws. And in St. Augustine's adoption of this as our identity, he called it the fall. And it was when humanity fell out of oneness with God due to the sinning of Adam and Eve. So the authors of Genesis, they were trying to understand and explain what happened in that Garden of Eden. And this was written, the Garden of Eden, Genesis was not even written down to the 5th or 6th century AD. Or BCE, I'm sorry. So they're trying to explain this myth to us. They're trying to explain, how did we end up from the Garden of Eden to where we are today? And they were thinking that, well, we did something bad and we deserve punishment for it. And the self-induced disasters and all the things that befall humanity. The Hebrew scriptures made God into a deity, sometimes a vengeful one. And it's a story of belief that we are separate from God. And we believe that we were doomed. So when Christianity became the official religion of the Romans, Christianity entered into the same language of separation from God. Because as we know, the Romans previously would follow the Greeks, and they believed in God, their gods, that they were separate entities. And if anybody knows and watches all of these movies about the gods, I really love Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson story, but they show the gods as temperamental and having their inhuman God experiences, but in a big way. So we still believed in this doom and the separation, that we weren't made in the likeness of God. We fell more and more away from that. So the death knell happened when we believed that God was, we lost the ability, we lost the faith that we are Christ-centric. What I mean by Christ-centric is that we were made in this perfect image and likeness of God, that we're already there, that we have this, that we don't have divinity within us, that we have to go through somebody else sometimes to even get there. And if we mess up, boy, we're going to get it, right? Think back to the times. I remember back to my mom would say that when I was growing up, wait till your father gets home. Oh boy, I was in big trouble. I would shake because I knew that I had done something bad and I was in for discipline. So this has kind of been the way that many of us were raised. And when and then we see that along the way that people have been adopted as being perfect, being the perfect emissary to God, because we don't have that within ourselves. So Jesus, even though he came in talking about, love, he talking about compassion, caring, all of these things, in a lot of ways, they were lost through different religious systems over the centuries and since then. And we started to see a little bit, things changing a little bit. And I was reading about this in some of the teachings, about what's happening with religion as we're looking at where we're going today. We see around 1958, people started pulling away from the traditional churches as much. They started finding small churches, families, And groups like the Fillmores in the 1800s to 1890s developed this new thought about our Christ consciousness. They really were reading into what Jesus taught and saw that there was different teachings, and everybody calls that new thought teachings. But I wonder, the first couple centuries before Christianity changed those concepts of God, it was really Jesus' original teachings. And what we're learning here is really Jesus' original teachings about compassion, about unity, love, all the things that he came here to teach us. So our new thought is return to those teachings. And we know that as these happen, we have these small communities and some larger communities now returning to these thoughts of love. We see that the language of separation really has to change now. So instead of embracing Jesus' way of embracing love, we were taught to believe in persecution and taught to believe in other things. But we now know that that is not what Jesus was about. Our creation myths and our stories, and some of them are good stories, they're interesting, have to change. As we return to this and we look at prosperity, if prosperity is our inheritance, then part of that is our language. And the language of oneness is a very important part of prosperity. And what Jesus brought to this world, brought to us back then, and what we're awakening to now, is a spiritual awakening. It can never be intellectual. What came out of, the churches, especially when we look at the Roman Church, it was church and state coming together using, a lot of political beliefs and bringing them together as part of a religion to have control. Where now we know that this is not an intellectual understanding. This language of oneness that we're about to delve into, is about something more important, spiritual intelligence, spiritual understanding that can't be taught because it's already inside of you. You have that divinity inside of you just waiting to awaken. And that's what we're talking about here today. And it is one of the prosperity principles. And if you really think about it, you say, okay, where is this language of oneness? What is this language of oneness that I'm talking about? The language of oneness isn't really even a language. By me saying that, it's not a language that we're going to speak. Because this language of oneness is inside of you, it's a knowing. It's an understanding. It's your intuition. That still small voice, the things you just know. And the more we awaken to that, and the more we develop this language of oneness in our lives, the more we're able to express it. Living the life of prosperity, living a healthy life. Seeing what we used to call miracles and knowing this is just our inheritance. These are the principles of prosperity, and in them are health, wealth, not having lack or scarcity, peace and joy that come from that, and an understanding that it's not about us learning this language. We already are, because we are love. So let's just take a deep breath on that. So where do we find that? You can find it in music. Remember, I just said earlier, I'm going to go back to the slide. I said, it's in our Lord's Prayer, the one that we say. The breath of life comes, who fills all realms of sound, light, and vibration. May your light be experienced in my utmost holiest. The truth is right there for us. It's in those words. Because when we can want to find this language of oneness, it's not about us talking each other into it. It's about us opening up, not using our minds, but allowing ourselves to express from our hearts. It's a heart opening. And within that, you may wake up and say, I have information that I didn't have last night, as you're opening this, because it's a knowing. It's the language, when you're in this language of oneness, you feel, and that's what it is. It's really a feeling of, it's really about feeling, not about talking, because it's not language of oneness, it's coming from talking. It's about becoming aware of everything around you. You know, it's that we can get that in meditation. We can get that through prayer. If you notice in unity, when we pray, we don't pray from a place of lack. We pray from a place where we already know that this is done and we are grateful for it. And sometimes we can have mystical experience where we feel that union with God. And I know I've had a couple mystical experiences in my life, and they've all had to do with nature. I've been out somewhere where the beauty of nature was so consuming, overwhelming, that I felt a part of it, that I didn't feel like I was separate from it, that I felt as one. And I knew that this creation was so amazing, so beyond anything I could even articulate. And I still can't articulate it very well today. That this is what and who we are. This is our natural state. I hear like Candida and Eric and Heather, they're beautiful, their music. And especially when they write songs, they're coming from that place, that language of oneness. We heard Candida's first song today. There was that oneness in there. She was in that language of oneness when she wrote it. There was just no way that she wasn't. So it comes from that. You could also, from the Hertz frequencies that we have, toning. People talk about the light language, the angelic light language. Had a lot of questions about that. And believe it or not, the angelic light language is not a language. You'll see the geometries, the sacred geometries in it. You'll see images, feelings. You'll know something because we're unlocking something that is a natural part of us. We'll see it in our intuition, and it's amazing when that comes to us. The Wednesday night esoterics group, we are going to be studying in the new year, little commercial, we're going to be studying the angelic light languages and opening ourselves up to more than that. So if you're interested, let me know. But it comes back to believing these 5 principles, to understanding this is who and what we are. And these experiences of intuition, this higher power, something that's unseen, is your natural state. So if you're having these experiences, and the more that we spend time together as a spiritual family, or the more you're studying and you're opening up to this, the more you're opening yourself to this world of oneness, because oneness can be a really hard concept. So I'm not here this morning when I talk about the history of what happened with separation, our language of separation. I'm not here criticizing anybody, Christianity, anybody, because there's a lot of wonderful things that have been done. Terrible things too, but a lot of wonderful things and a lot of helping that's still going on today. That is all leading to the language of oneness. So for our purposes today, we want to know, how do we broaden our awareness of this law, this language of oneness? How do we spend more time? And one of our biggest challenges is that we are linear beings. So we come into this world as linear beings, and we have to change that, because this language of oneness is not a linear language. It's in the quantum fields, this field that we cannot see and that science is just starting to measure. And when we enter that state, and we call it, the void, the vortex, we call it the fields. It's called so many different things, but when we're in that, we're naturally opening ourselves up to this. So we can do it through some meditation. We're familiar with, light language a little bit, but what we hear, people say, well, can you write it down? It's hard to do that because it's not a conceptual language. It's something that, if you hear someone say a picture is worth 1,000 words, in light language, so is sound. So are these sacred images that come through. Because They're in a language that we don't naturally understand, but that is our natural language. So the true hearing of this, of the sound too, when we say, okay, I want to hear the sound in light language, I want to hear that, it's not going to come from sound, it's clairaudience. It's something that comes from a place that is so much bigger than our five senses. So we come into this world where we feel, as feeling beings, we can feel this language of oneness. It's not just spoken, it's a feeling. When we go back and when I think about, well, what happens that we don't have it today? We think back to the biblical story of the Tower of Babel, how people went into the tower and they were struck and they came out speaking different languages and they could not understand each other. So that brings the concept of us, well, if we're going to be speaking this language of oneness, who do we share that with? Who do we talk to? Well, I think that, we have to know that, know our audience too. But as we're spending time together, and you wouldn't be sitting here today listening to this if you didn't have some concept of this language of oneness, because you're already speaking it, you're already using it. And it's a part of prosperity, because when we have that feeling, we become one with it. We see it in our lives. That's our power and our divinity. But how do we use it in everyday life? You may be saying, well, Cherie, this is great, but how do I use this in my everyday life? We have to tune into this language of oneness, and we can use it in our everyday being, because we can open our hearts up just a little bit more. And when you're having a conversation with someone, you may hear it on two different levels. One, you may hear with your ears and your intellectual mind, but with your heart, you may notice something else. It's where compassion comes from. As we understand this law, this language of oneness, we become more compassionate because we understand, we start to have perspective on where the person's coming from instead of just judgment. People that have studied Druidism, shamans, they work very closely with this language of oneness. They become part of it, whether it's nature, whatever they're working with. So for those who have come to Unity Radiant Light, when we're talking about the language of oneness, if you know me, I'm a Unity minister, but I don't usually go by Reverend, because the Fillmores didn't either. Because with this language of oneness, they didn't want to have any separation, and they felt that using the titles was showing separation. Now, I'm not saying someone that goes by Reverend is doing it wrong, and they're not. It's just a personal choice that I made. It's the same reason why I use the word namaskar instead of namaste. Namaste is from the teacher to the student. Namaskar is from person to person. I see the divinity in you. So all of these things that we use, we have to think about it every day. What are we using in our language? Are we using a language of separation? And this week, I'm just going to ask you to explore that. Just listen to what you're saying or what you're thinking. And is that really in separation, or is this in a language of oneness? No judgment, just becoming aware, getting used to it. So if we can just make a start, and if you're here, you've already made that start, we can transition to this fully. We can do anything. If we think about what Peter said, Peter came and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Until 7 times? Jesus said to him, I don't tell you until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. When we use the language of oneness, we're open to compassion. We're open to not judging others, not putting ourselves into danger, but being out of that judgment. And I love what the Dalai Lama said about this, because he really, when he talks about oneness, he said, if every 8-year-old in the world is taught meditation, we will eliminate violence from the world within 1 generation. That is so profound. That is what he's talking about, us moving into this language of oneness. We would see the end of gender disputes, generational gaps, political differences, anything that leads us to separation. We'll understand in this language of oneness that we really aren't that different. Everything else is an illusion of separation. So Dalai Lama recognizes that by meditation, going into the meditative state. We'll start, and the more you go into it, the more you're going to see. You'll start seeing geometry. You'll start seeing all of these things that lead to language of oneness. Meister Eckhart said, God is in all things, but not so far as God is divine and so far as he's rational. God is nowhere so properly as in the soul, in the innermost of the soul. That God is inside of us, but God is not separate from us. In the innermost of our soul, we are God. There is no separation. God doesn't love us because God is love. You see the difference? We don't seek prosperity because we are prosperous. And these are the beliefs that we have to embrace. This is the language of oneness. And with that, we open ourselves up to whole new worlds of prosperity. So instead of asking the question, why don't I have what I need? Maybe we should ask the question, what illusion have I brought into my life that I'm seeing scarcity? And instead of feeling guilty and saying, oh my gosh, this is what I'm doing, saying, how do I shift my consciousness and my language to oneness with prosperity? It's a very simple switch, saying, okay, if I'm seeing this in my life, then what can I do? Because I have that divinity inside of me. And that divinity is part of everything. So if there's that one thing we're looking for in this beautiful, wonderful life we want to have and we want to express it, we're already one with it. So what can I do to recognize that oneness more? So the practices that we're doing and we're sharing with each other, we're already on the road to this wonderful, wonderful prosperity, oneness. And when you wake up and you know things that no one taught you, when you understand concepts that aren't taught to you, you know you're fully in the language of compassion. Understanding something from another person's perspective is called compassion. We're in that. But what about that cat that you have? And I see a lot of your videos and pictures, the dog you have, the horse, or whatever you have, that you feel so close to them that you know what they're thinking. That's the language of oneness. You're already doing it. Now, is this something you want to share with others? You can. It might be hard to explain to your vet that you know what's going on with your dog because the dog told you. But isn't that really how medical intuitive works? Or how do you let your neighbor know that their tree is asked for a certain supplement because it told you that? Those are the things you might want to stop and think. Now, I really, people could probably call me a nut, and they probably do, because I'm not, I'm more comfortable with that. But wherever your comfort level is, step into that language of oneness. You can express it to other people as you want to. It's not a big problem. You might get labeled as a nut, but what I want to call you is something different. The world is not speaking a language of oneness as a whole. And if you're here and you're listening and you want this language of oneness, then you're not a nut. You're a spiritual trailblazer. You're here to help teach the world, to help it become a better place, to help show people that there's oneness with prosperity, oneness with health, oneness with peace, oneness with joy, and oneness with love. There's answer lies in your spiritual understanding and in this language, in this field. So as John said in chapter 12, verse 36, believe in the light while you have the light so that you may become children of light. And we know the word light is talking about this language of oneness. There's a whole different understanding of it now. So this week, just simply observe the language you're using. Everyday talking, interactions with others, prayers. How's your prayer meditation? How's that language? Is it from a place of oneness or from separation? And simply begin to make that shift. Do you invite prosperity into your life? If you believe your prosperity, you believe in this oneness, you know that you are one with everything. this is already who you are as a divine child of God, then absolutely. I'm so happy to be here as we walk through this process to gently shift our belief systems. So namaskar. I love making this journey with you. God bless you all.
Amen.
All right. So I just invite you to say the meditation affirmation with me. And then I was putting together a meditation. I found a beautiful one from Unity that I'm actually going to use this morning. So as we say, I am open and receptive to the spirit of truth, healing in me what needs to be healed, and revealing to me what needs to be revealed. I just invite you to sit back, relax.
Remembering there is only one thing going on here, Spirit. There is only one divine essence permeating all things seen and unseen, and it is what I call God. And I know I am one with it. And so from this place of knowing, I bring my focus to my heart center. I allow the whirling thoughts of the day to be set aside just for a moment as I get centered in prayer. So take this moment as you focus on your heart center to rest in the stillness and the awareness of Spirit. Focused on the oneness, focused on Spirit. I know there is only Spirit, only God. I move, breathe, and have my being at the center of it. I know it is responsive to my deep-held feelings, thoughts, and beliefs. So today I bring my focus to feelings that are empowering, feelings that are good. I take a moment now to focus on the love that is at the core of my being. I know that as I center myself in this stillness, in this awareness of Spirit, that anything is possible. And as I recognize that Spirit always says yes to me, I make all of my desires and requests good ones. Ones that are empowering, fulfilling, loving, and filled with gratitude. Centered in God, all is well. And I allow even more of the good to flow into my life in this time of recognition. I know that I am the author of my life, and Spirit says yes. So today, I am peace. Today, I know that I am love, as I align with the power of love. Today, I know that I am filled with gratitude, as I align with the goodness of Spirit. My heart is filled with gratitude, knowing that Spirit is at the core of who I am. I live, move, and have my being fully supported by this benevolent love. I move forward in grace, in peace, and in absolute confidence. My life is so blessed, and Spirit blesses me even more. So with a grateful heart, I allow this prayer into the universe, into the mind of God, knowing it is already done.
God, we know, we see, we feel as we come together in this oneness. And all the prayers for those that we are in our lives, those around us, the people that have experienced Hurricane Ian and other things. We recognize that everything is in perfect and divine order, and we see them as healthy. Every cell in their bodies working in perfect and divine order. We see prosperity in every area of their lives. Lives filled, and we hold for that. We see it, affirm. Lives filled with joy and peace. And we recognize each other from this field of love that we come from. We're so grateful. So grateful for all of the teachings from Jesus, our wayfarer, from the Fillmores, all the masters and teachers. They come to teach us truth. We are awake and we're saying yes to it. Yes. And so it is.